You're welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk this afternoon, we have Andrew Beagley, Chief Risk Officer at RiskOpsAI, Fabio Campos, Managing Partner, Global Cyber Strategy and Risk at IBM Consulting Cybersecurity Services. They join me to discuss protecting the brand by maintaining operational resiliency and executing digital transformation. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to MarketSite and welcome to TradeTalks. And Andrew, really, in order to execute on this digital transformation, one needs to understand how to manage organizational risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you think, Jill, the traditional approach to risk management, which has been, by and large, reactive and piecemeal and so on, not really data-driven, that in no way, shape, or form allows an organization really to get onto the front foot and execute a proper program around digital transformation or operational resiliency. This is becoming increasingly apparent now with increased regulation, rapidly changing risk environment, whether that's around cyber or data privacy. So it's more important than ever to have in place a risk governance program, a risk framework that is joined up with the goals and objectives around digital transformation and implementation of securing operational resiliency.
Right, well, I mean, Fabio, particularly with financial services companies, because there's a whole other layer of regulation that comes on top of that as well.
Yes, and well said, Andrew. One of the things that we do see happening and to happen is how we capitalize more on the data, right? So traditional programs were not doing as much. There's some data, absolutely. Now some companies continue to go through their transformational focus, and how we get these organizations to really focus on strategy plus risk and a measurable capacity is critical. So that's awesome that we're seeing that transition, we're seeing that focus, a lot more to come, but certainly that's the right direction that we have to go through.
Part of the challenge is being able to quantify and scale what it means when a cyber attack happens to a company. I mean, of course you have reputational risk, but then how do you also quantify it in terms of the impact to revenue? You can't simply shut down revenue lines as you're trying to figure out how to manage this cyber breach.
No, absolutely, and great point. One thing that we see is some quantification in the marketplace right now taking place. I think it needs to evolve a little bit more, I think like a natural process, but essentially if we have a good understanding of the threat landscape of that organization, we do understand how that company has their specific strategy from a business standpoint, and we know all the critical assets are. So essentially we do a combination of those variables and a few others, of course, but then we get closer to a more mature calculation of how that may or may not impact the revenue stream or the P&L overall, or any other aspect of financial statements of that organization might require. So we see that evolution, that maturity happening. We see a lot of people talking about, but the need is, and that's, Andrew and I have been talking substantially on this, and how we help organizations really get to the calculations or the sort of a closer to a more tangible component on the risk quantification aspect of that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely, Fabio. And at RiskOpsAI, we spent a lot of time talking about investing in what we describe as continuous compliance. And to your point, Fabio, what we're focused on there is understanding kind of the likelihood and impact of specific threats, having in place proper measurement around control effectiveness is important, and then being able to pass through all of those different aspects to come up with something meaningful and quantifiable around residual risk. Now, if you're able to have those different components through continuous compliance baked into your programs around digital transformation and operational resiliency, you're then on the front foot and in a much better position to be able to start to quantify and understand your risk exposure in a meaningful way, which then the final piece of that is then you can make smarter decisions around risk mitigation and risk prioritization. So it's kind of an end-to-end, risk-focused, near real-time approach, as opposed to what we were saying at the beginning, this kind of traditional piecemeal and reactive approach. That's the transition that we're talking to companies about, and companies are engaging in now.
Well, part of the challenge is you have to weigh what are the business priorities versus the cyber risk, right? Your product teams, your revenue teams, they're going to want to get the most modern, technologically advanced product to the market, but there also has to be, whether it's back testing or cyber risk scenarios that have to be played out on the back end as well. So how are you advising teams to balance this?
Right. So Jill, what we believe the most effective way is to have a really joined up program where the impact of risk, whether that's around cyber, data privacy, regulatory compliance, those impacts are joined inextricably to the impact on the organization's goals and objectives. Okay, so rather than the risk program being developed down one end of the hall and the people making strategy decisions down the other, everything is aligned. And if you can do that as you're making business decisions around the launch of a new product or a new service, or migration of certain activities to the cloud, you can have a naturally risk-based discussion at the time that you're making those decisions, rather than putting in place some back-end process to do periodic monitoring after the fact, which of course could be too late.
Right, right. Fabio, it almost feels like businesses got used to the idea of having to migrate to the cloud, multiple clouds at that. True. We certainly realized the significance of that during the pandemic when we had this massive shift to hybrid work as one example. Do you think companies are prepared for, let's call it the next shift, to incorporate AI into their models? We were talking off camera about this. AI is nothing new to companies, of course, with it becoming more consumer facing and everyone, using ChatGPT as an example as part of their vernacular. It's almost an expectation now where it has to happen, but it has been happening.
True. Gil, I think, piggyback on what you just started, and I'll bring this to the AI conversation. So a lot of that risk maturity program has to take place. One of the challenges that we see, and we're advising clients on, even before I talk to the AI piece, but it will connect, is the fact that the foundational aspects of that organization from a technology infrastructure and the solutions, they have to be updated, right? So maintained, updated. So we keep talking about the maintaining your technology foundation up to date. So that's one critical factor. The second is ensuring that they have we call it a threat management end-to-end program, ensuring that you see what's happening and you have procedures, processes, and controls in place to tackle that. So when we start bringing that into the velocity of application of AI, and I'm going to even talk about Gen AI, but as a ramification of it, with the fact that we do see a lot of this foundational aspects being dealt with. Some companies are still struggling a little bit to maintain that environment updated, but also translating that into learning more from this wealth of data they're producing. So there's a wealth of information out there, and we start putting that together through some AI capabilities to really elevate how fast we identify, respond, or protect, for that matter, in the cyber world. So not new, true, right? So how we take this forward? So I guess two components we see happening, and we need to make sure that we advise our clients and organizations in general, are two things. One is how we're going to secure AI, right? So governance models around that, all the processes will need to be updated or somehow refined, based on that foundation that we're talking about. And the second part is you leveraging AI for the security purpose of the organization. So those two aspects have to kind of come together. And I'll finish that thought with another component, which is making sure that people are educated in leveraging that wealth of outcomes and insights that will be generated through those new processes, and how to make the best decisions, or more educated decisions, and what to do or not to do first, second, third. So that's how we see the evolution.
Yeah, absolutely, Fabio. And AI, when used effectively, really serves to underpin what we describe as kind of a next generation risk program, and is the fountain, if you like, for continuous compliance. Whether that's normalization of multiple disparate data sources, all of which are risk related, but through AI, you can actually aggregate apples with apples with apples, right? Looking at the common components of different data sources, Critical. So that's useful. You can then start to quantify your risk, whether that's cyber or data privacy, in a meaningful way, using dollars and cents rather than red, amber, green, or high, medium, and low. And once you've done that, you're then in a position to be able to start risk scenario planning, prioritizing your investments, what are your risk mitigation strategies and so on. So if you can underpin a program around operational resiliency with those aspects, using, say, continuous compliance, then, as we've been discussing here, you're then in a position to be able to, frankly, run the day-to-day operations of the company, embark on digital transformation, launch new products and services in a way that risk management is an integral part of all of that decision making. That's what we mean by continuous compliance.
And it's so interesting with AI and machine learning for that matter too. It's almost like you're blocking and tackling. The threat actors are leveraging it just as much as companies are leveraging these newer technologies to mitigate the threats that are inherent to this system.
Exactly, Jill, and that's really the fundamental reason why you need your risk program to be on the front foot. You need to be proactive, you need to be predictive. If you're able to make changes in near real time, if you understand your risk posture in near real time, you will then be in a much better position to be able to identify blind spots in your operations systems, make smarter decisions around digital transformation based on risk, all of which goes to your point, Jill, about trying to stay ahead of all of the bad actors that, of course, will continue to be out there and looking for new and different ways to compromise organizations and their infrastructure.
Right, and Fabio, it's not like you can operate in a silo. The CISO, the security leaders need to be able to have a look across the board to understand where risk needs to be mitigated or where there are holes in the system. It can't just be, okay, this is my lane, I'm staying here. You need to be able to have a holistic view of what's happening across the org.
Thank you for that comment. That is crucial for any new risk management program, right? So cyber historically has not been a part of that. So maybe some organizations a little bit further down ahead of others did that or are doing that, but not a whole lot of companies have that component of cyber built in or integrated. That's one factor. The second factor I would call out is, to Andrew's point, how we make this known and really digested by not only CISOs, but other executives in the organization, because they're going to say, oh, this is a security issue, the CISO is going to deal with that, or my CTO is going to deal with that. No, security today, or cybersecurity for that matter, with AI or not, has to be embedded in the processes of that organization go through. Therefore, that consolidation of different areas and different processes have to come together. And that is the benefit in how we are approaching this now, leveraging the other components of the organization that brings variables for the risk identification, quantification, management, and reporting from a holistic standpoint. So when we even I would say extend that thought into operational resiliency. Organizations need to think about, okay, what is my minimal viable company? If something happens through a cyber attack or not, or exploitation of a cyber channel, might be something related to the business, what can I do or should have in place to ensure I don't stop? Right? What is my minimal component? So the operational aspect or decision-making capabilities have to come from an integrated cyber risk, if you will, or a cyber resiliency integrated program. So that is critical.
The fact of the matter is the board's not responsible for it as well, especially, for example, publicly traded companies with SEC regulations being able to report these and also report the, how we're going to mitigate this attack. This is a board issue. It's not just, doesn't just belong to the security and tech teams anymore.
Total, and if I can add to that, we're doing some of these new SEC cyber rules requirements, and what we're finding is there's a lot of good information that those reports at 20Fs or 10Ks or whatever those will become in the near future, that they are reporting things. When you get underneath and you see those processes and programs and saying how they're actually doing something, there's a lot of room that we're seeing that, not to call improvement, but to really rethink how they do that for the benefit of addressing their continuous controls, monitoring compliance, as well as the reporting requirement that will lead into the board responsibilities.
And Fabio, you talked about the the CISO, and we've touched on the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Risk Officer. So what I would say is, anyone in any of those roles, don't feel so alone. By creating an integrated, a joined up front foot risk program by creating this, what we would describe as a single source of truth, where any stakeholder in the organization is able to tap into the same risk metrics, the same risk analytics. Internally, at the top table, you're able to have a much more joined up conversation around your risk profile, and it shouldn't be on one person. It's everybody, it's the company, and to your point, Jill, it's the board that ultimately is is responsible for the risk management program, the efficacy of the risk arrangements, and so on. So by everybody being able to tap into the same information, use those same sources, naturally the organization is going to be in a much more informed place to conduct its risk program.
Right, and it's also a matter of communicating these needs to the board effectively, being able to speak, board speak, and senior management speak, where if you do have these risk mitigation, operational resiliency steps in place, you're able to show that to them in a language they can understand. And again, it's not siloed, but this is how it affects brand reputation, revenue, all of that.
Exactly. It's you have a program that is joined up from end to end, whether those are data privacy concerns, cyber vulnerabilities, new regulatory requirements, changes in your controls or changes in your processes. Whatever's driving those potential issues on the front line day to day, you're able to integrate all of those and understand how those issues potentially impact your goals and objectives. So, and that's, if you can build your program around that with the standards around operational resiliency, then the board and everybody at the top table can have a much more joined up discussion about where they need to focus their time to manage and mitigate those risks.
Can I add something very quick to that? Absolutely in agreement. I would incorporate one key part, I would say. Today, we still see a lot of metrics for reporting purposes being done at a very tactical level, right? Which is hard to communicate that. So there's still some challenges in that communication up to the board. I would even say, even before the board, is executive management, right? So one of the things that we've been really helping our organizations with is defining what is critical for the board from a metric standpoint, right? For my strategic indicators. So what's really critical for the integrated risk ecosystem of that organization or group companies, then becomes our risk indicators. Then you have the performance of the resiliency program on itself that has some performance and progress update type indicators. So we have all these different families of types of information that if you know how to navigate that and put some specific processes in how to report, so that takes away a little bit of the confusion or the challenges that some of the CISOs or other executives would have still to communicate a cyber problem or a cyber risk problem into a different level of the organization. So that's what we're seeing, how to help get from what organizations are to a more mature program of reporting and measuring.
And that's a perfect lead into my last question for the last minute here. Are we getting better at mitigating cybersecurity risk? I almost feel like if you don't hear from cyber teams or if nothing is being outwardly reported, that's a good thing?
Definitely maturing, right? So I think there's always an evolution. Hard to keep up because, as you pointed out, so as much as we are leveraging AI and other techniques to defend, threat actors are leveraging similar ways of doing that, but we're better. And we'll continue to kind of make and help organizations be better at that.
All right, appreciate the insight, Fabio. Andrew, thank you for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from the Nasdaq Market Site. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.